Hello, everybody here. We've already been talking for a couple minutes, but everybody out there in the internet thing, I've been hearing that interweb thing's gonna be big someday. For those of you out there on the internet, hello. I'm Jeff Cable. I'm back at B&H. Today we are doing two presentations. First one is on, so I called it creative event photography, but in talking to B&H earlier about doing this, I really wanted to focus on kind of composition and lighting for event photography. So that's what we're gonna do here. And I also added some other fun stuff. And then this afternoon at 4 o'clock Eastern, 1 o'clock Pacific time, I'll be doing another presentation on wildlife photography. So kind of going everything from your backyard to the zoo, all the way to the plains of Africa, rainforest, and so forth. So two of my favorite subjects. I'm really excited to be talking about those. As I mentioned, this is the first one, so we're going to jump right in. I should mention that this presentation is sponsored by ProGrade Digital. A lot of people have probably never heard of ProGrade Digital. So many of you know that I spent 12 years at Lexar as director of marketing for them, used all Lexar cards and readers. Lexar then got disbanded and then purchased and kind of is in transition. A couple of the top people from Lexar left and created a new company called ProGrade Digital, which focuses only on kind of the pro market, which really interested me. It's a small company that is really nimble, which I love because they come out with new products and they come to me a lot and say, what do you think, or what would you change? So I actually went to them as an example. So you'll see attached to my laptop is a reader magnetically, which is cool. So this is their new SD CFast reader. And I said to them, they showed this to me and they said, what do you think? I said, this is really cool. I said, but it'd be really cool if there's a way to stick it to my laptop because the Olympics, we like to have one here and one here. And so they said, well, we could do it with magnets. And actually, they didn't even tell me that. They said, we'll come up with a way to do it. And this is a prototype, so it doesn't hold as well. The new ones have a stronger magnet. But it's cool to have it there, so when I shoot events, which is what we're talking about, I can just keep it there and throw memory cards in right at the top. So they listened to that, and actually, they just showed me another new product, which is coming out soon. And I said, here's some changes I would make to that. And within like 3 weeks, they'd already implemented that. So I love the fact that they're a small company. They're focusing strictly on the pro market. They're doing memory cards and readers. So that's what I'm using now. So they sponsored this. If it wasn't for them, I wouldn't be here. So thank you to them. We'll talk a little bit about their products as we go through here. So let's talk about event photography. And actually, before I went into the creative side, I wanted to kind of give you a couple slides on the advantages and disadvantages of doing it. How many people here are shoot events? Okay, reasonable amount, over half. I want to talk about both the advantages and disadvantages. I'm actually going to flip that around, and we'll start with disadvantages so we end on a positive note. Talk about composition, lighting, and more. That's kind of what we're going to do today. Let's talk about the disadvantages first. It is grueling work. Those of you who photograph events, and I do a lot of bar mitzvahs and weddings and things, and it is an all-day event. I generally leave the house around 8 in the morning, hit Starbucks, this is my routine, go straight to wherever I'm shooting, and if it's a mitzvah, I start around 9 in the morning, and I'm done around midnight, which means I get home, I download and back up to about 1 in the morning, so it's a really, really long day. It's on the weekends, which is frustrating to my wife. My kids are now 21, 23. I don't think they care if I'm home or not. But it is tough because a lot of people invite us to parties on Saturday night. And of course, I can't go. And there's lots of competition. And the competition ranges from other photographers to, people say, well, gee, my uncle has a DSLR, he'll do it. As if having a DSLR makes you a photographer, which it doesn't. But there are some people who at least think that way. Now, on the positive side of this, I get to capture really happy times for my clients, which is really, really fun. I get to insert myself into their family for that entire day. And generally what I shoot is really happy events. And that's really fun, whether it's a wedding or a bar mitzvah or birthday party or whatever. And I look at every image I shoot as a potential of capturing family history for those people. So I don't look at myself as a photographer. I kind of look at myself as a historian. I take it really seriously. And I mean, not that I walk around serious, I'm having fun, but I'm really trying to capture who those people are, not who I am, but who they are, so that they have this, because here's the thing, we as photographers take a picture and go, ooh, that one's really sharp and it's in focus and great lighting. They don't. They look at what we just captured as telling a story, and it could end up on their wall or in an album or something that they're looking at 30, 40, 50 years from now. We forget that. So I try to keep that in mind as I'm shooting. It is very good recurring income. So when I was here, was it here last time, I think, when I was talking about the how tough it is to be a photographer? And people were like, wow, that was kind of bleak. And I'm like, well, it's not bleak. I was trying to be realistic. But this actually is a good way to make money. So if you're trying to sell photos at local art shows, that's a tough business. But if you have a good recurring customer base in events, it does very well. So for me, this is actually probably my largest income generator is from doing weekend events. So and I book them out usually up to 3 years in advance. I just booked one the other day for May of 2021 already. Which, going back to the disadvantages, is tough because my wife will say, make sure you clear each date with me before you book it. So I say to her, hey, what are you doing May 7th of 2021? She's like, I have no idea. Okay, we're booking it. It's income, so we'll do it. One of the things I love about event photography is I can be creative every time. If you think about corporate headshots, they tend to be a little bit more cookie cutter. Like you get good lighting, you get it right, and you start firing them off one at a time. Not that there's anything wrong with that, but at least this way I can be really creative because I can try different lenses, which we'll talk about, different composition, different lighting, and I can push myself every time to get something different. So whenever I'm shooting, that is my goal, is every event to come up with something different than I got last time. So as we go through the photos, you'll see some similarities, and I'll talk about that, but I'll also talk about how I'm trying to push myself. Part of that is because I want every client to have something different, and also part of it is because I'm so ADD that I want to challenge myself. Going back to the previous point, I have a lot of people who call me and say, I looked at your website, and I love that you're showing something different. Your competition has the same pose for every family of them squished together with their faces like this, and everything looks the same. It doesn't show any creativity, right? It just shows, okay, I'm just doing my job. And so people don't like that. They want to see that I'm embracing who they are. If you have a kid who's really outgoing or a wedding couple who's really fun, play off of that. And actually, one of the wedding pictures I did, and it's not in here, the bride and groom's brother jumped on their back, because that's who they are. You saw that on the blog. So that's who they were. Why not capture it and have fun with it? It's one of their favorite pictures. Would have I posed them that way? No. But that's what they wanted to do. I'm like, go for it. So I'm always looking for that. All right, let's talk about composition. And I should mention that a lot of what we're talking about here, composition and lighting and so forth, pertains to almost anything. But in this case, we're going to focus on the event side. I like to shoot from all angles. So people tend to, because I'm about almost 6 feet tall, a lot of people tend to shoot from just 6 feet. I try to shoot looking up, looking down, climbing up on things, getting low, getting on the floor. So I will try all different things to get different looks. I will shoot rule of thirds, and I will shoot centered. There are some people in this business that say you should never shoot everything centered. I don't follow that. I'll shoot different ways, again, for different looks. So as an example, this is my nephew. Got married in the Sacramento area. This is our wedding gift to all my relatives as we shoot their wedding and make albums for them. This is shot at my height. This is me standing up and shooting. We found this cool field of mustard that was near about a mile from where they were getting married. So we said to them before the wedding, hey, do we have a little bit of time? Let's get you out to this mustard field. So we drove just the couple out, and we did some shots there. So this is standing at 6 foot level. And then what I did is I like the clouds, everything in the background. There's some silos and things. So I wanted to get a shot with just the mustard. So what I did is I actually climbed a little berm there, and I shot down on them. And what you'll see is a very different look from this to this. And they're not moving. They're in the same, see the break between we had to move into a spot that was open. So they did not move, I moved. And I also changed the aperture so that I blurred out the background more. So that's just me moving up a little bit. And then that was shot with a 70 to 200. Then I put a wide angle lens and I got down on the ground and shot up through the mustard flowers. Again, they didn't move at all. So three very different looks from the same spot. So even though you're in that same place, you can vary it. One of the things I've been doing lately when I shoot bar mitzvahs, I like to get really low so that it makes the Torah bigger and the kid, and it gives me a view up. If it's a pretty upper view at the temple, I like doing this. So this is a 16-35 lens shot at about f5.6, and I just get down, I'm on my knees, almost at the height of the table, as you can tell, to include everything above them. And in this case, I had pretty stained glass windows. Why not show that? If I shot this straight on, I wouldn't have that. I would just have him in kind of the brown background. And I can tell you that every time I do this and I show it to the family on the back of the camera, they love it. This is one, again, this is another nephew of mine. I have way too many relatives getting married right now. It's killing me. Another nephew of mine who got married, and they were driven up to the wedding location in this old Mustang. And it was probably the hardest wedding I ever shot. It was 104 degrees, and it was an outside wedding with no shade. So I was dying. I was in all black. Who thought of that one? And sweating my brains out. So that's why they all had the umbrellas. They were trying to stay cool. But I thought it'd be kind of fun just to have them put the umbrellas up like that and go behind the Mustang. And I again went up on this hill to look down on them to include the car. So again, by getting up high, I got that shot. And because I'm nuts, I also will lay down on the floor. This is one of my favorite shots on the floor. This is at a bat mitzvah. So my bat mitzvah girl is right here in the white hat at the bottom of the frame. Had all of her friends kind of come around. And I told them, I said, hey, I'm gonna lay down on the ground and I'm gonna just shoot up. Everybody look down at me. I do get some weird looks sometimes from the parents, like, what are you doing on the floor? But when I show them the shot, they love it. So it's kind of a fun shot to do. And again, it's different. And so I'm always pushing myself to shoot different ways. Talking about rule of thirds. This is a wedding I did. Another one. This is another freebie this is my neighbor, Bridget. I know this is the story of my life. So Bridget got married about 6 months ago. I like the fact that I always move around if I'm allowed to. So typically if I'm shooting a bar mitzvah or a bat mitzvah, they don't want you running all over the place. They want you in one spot. So by the way, I should mention you should always find out the rules for wherever you're shooting and then break them a little bit. In this case, I was allowed to move around. So I moved over to the side. I saw this. I focused on them, not the priest, because I wanted you to focus on the couple. But I like the framing with him looking at them and them looking at him. Again, it tells a story. So I shot that purposely, keeping them off-centered, because it helps direct you kind of back and forth between the two of them. But because I have selective focus, you know who my subject is. So speaking of that, and speaking of the whole depth of field, and again, going back for a second, I'm determining where the people are looking in that photo. So do you want to isolate a person? So if I want to isolate one person, I'll probably shoot at f2.8. If I want everybody in focus, then I might shoot at f8 or f11, depending on where I'm shooting. So I'll think about that as I'm taking the photo. And I'll show you examples in a second. There are some times when shooting events that you're in a bad location. And trust me, I've shot events where my background is fire extinguishers, exit signs, and those of you who shot events have all been there. And that's really frustrating. So you need to shoot to avoid the background. So you're probably gonna shoot at 2.8 or f4. You'll probably shoot either low angles or high angles and not straight on with the exit sign right behind their head. But we've all been there. And then in other times, we're in great environments where we're trying to highlight the background. So if we have really nice uplighting or flower arrangements or cool things on the walls or great lighting, then we'll take advantage of that. So here's a shot I did not too long ago. This is at his bar mitzvah. It was an amazingly perfect day for shooting because it was very overcast. So I moved him in. I had a off-camera flash on the side. You can tell he's more lit. Actually, I take that back. That was actually sunlight coming in from the side with him. And I was popping just a little bit of flash, straight from the flash, no diffuser, turning the flash power way down, just get a little bit of catch light in the eyes. But this was shot at 2.8 because I wanted the bush in front to be out of focus. I wanted everything in the background to be out of focus, but I wanted him sharp. So I moved back, I shot with the 70-200 at 2.8 right on his eyes. This shot I just did 2 weeks ago because he had his own yod or pointer for the Torah, and I thought it was really cool because it was glass. I told him, go ahead and hold it away from you a little bit, and he held it out like that. I focused just on that at 2.8 and shot the picture. So he's blurred in the background, and that's not my subject. My subject is that, is the pointer. I do this a lot when I'm shooting the montage. The kids are watching a video of themselves. They do this a lot at mitzvahs. So I'm shooting this, and again, I talked earlier about who's my subject and do I want all of them in focus. I don't want all of them in focus here. I actually want everybody else to be slightly blurred. Everybody in the front's blurred, his brother's blurred in the background, but Ari's perfectly sharp, right in the middle. And it just so happened that his best friend Jake was sitting right next to him. I did his mitzvah as well. And they were at the same plane. I got lucky on that. So they're both in focus. But ultimately, when I'm shooting that, all I really care is I'm on the eyes of my subject and holding on for dear life as tight as I can and firing off. When I shot this one at a wedding in North Carolina, I knew that my focus was the bride, and I was okay with letting everybody else go slightly out of, or very out of focus as we went farther back. Again, I did the standard shot where they're all in focus. I got that already. Now I want to try to push myself a little bit. I asked them all to lean just a little bit farther. And again, I did that just to try something different. My wife didn't like it. I liked it. They liked it. You just never know. The good thing with digital is take it. If you don't like it, delete it. This is one of the great things about having memory cards, and lots of them. I shoot generally about 2,500 to 3,500 images in a day, and I'll pair through it for the client. This shot's going to be controversial because we all despise the people who have their phones and iPads out during weddings. This is my wife's second cousin, a wedding I just did a couple weeks ago, another one as a gift for them. And this woman had her phone out. Now, they weren't supposed to do that, but I thought, well, what the heck, I'll take advantage of it. So I focused only on her phone and not on the background, because you can see the wedding party in the phone, and it's a different view. Again, it's controversial because a lot of photographers get really fed up with it, and I understand that. This woman was being fairly discreet and keeping it close to her. We did have a guy with an iPad who went right in the front. The video guy ran right down the aisle and said, knock it off, and stopped him. So at least she was being kind of close to herself, and it wasn't as intrusive. But I took advantage of it. I kind of liked it. I'm not recommending that people do it, but you know. This shot's totally different. This is at a place called Hiller Aviation Museum. This is in Northern California. Did a mitzvah there, and they have a full cockpit of a 747 there. And so I said to the family before the party started, they got there about 15 minutes early, let's go into the cockpit. So we got in. Now, there was no sky in the background. I dropped that in Photoshop later on just for the fun of it, because the background was like they're building like a warehouse or something. But I put them in there, and I couldn't shoot this at f2.8 or f4, because if I'm focusing on the people in the front, the kids in the background are going to be way out of focus. So I had to shoot this at f11 and use my flash to try to light all of them as best I could to get them all in focus. So again, as I'm shooting, I'm thinking about who I want to have in focus every time. This one here, this is again my wife's second cousin, Cardiff and Linda. A wedding I did about a month ago. And we had done the standard shots, which you'll see a little bit later. I have one in here. I pulled them away from everybody else so that they would be in focus and everybody else would be soft. Okay, that wasn't a mistake. That was on purpose. I wanted to highlight them away from everybody else because they, of course, are the stars of the day. And so by doing that, I'm directing you as the viewer, where do I want your eyes to go? And so two things I look for when I'm shooting this way, I'm looking at who's in focus and where the bright spots are in the frame. Because if you have bright spots, the human eye will drift there. So we're going to talk about location in a minute. I chose this location because if you look at the background, there are no white spots. It's just pure green and browns. This is the exact opposite. This is another one I did. This is my wife's nephew. Is that right? So another relative.
Single?
Yeah, I know. We still have a couple. I still have some relatives who are not married. I'm worried. And this was actually in Mammoth, California, Mammoth Lakes, and the background was really crazy cool. So I wanted to make sure to include the background. So I didn't want to shoot this at f2.8 and blur everything in the background. I wanted you to see the mountains and the snow that was left. We actually had a huge bear that showed up at their wedding that I got a cool picture of. I didn't put it in here. All right, so talk about locations. As I talked about a minute ago, I had scouted the location for this wedding last month. My wife and I had gone there about 3 weeks before the wedding, and we looked at the surroundings. We walked around, and literally an eighth of a mile from where they're getting married is a park, state park, and they had these beautiful pathways through the trees, and I wasn't sure what the weather would be, if it was going to be overcast or really sunny, and I thought this is my safest area, because if it is bright sunny, I want to have a nice even light. So I had picked this out. So they knew, because they were with us 3 weeks before. The day of the wedding, before we start shooting at the wedding area, we're going to all meet here first and shoot, and that's what we did. And the background almost looked fake. It almost looks like one of those backdrops. And of course, she's really pretty, and she's wearing white. The colors of the bouquet worked perfectly with the background, and it just kind of worked. This is the shot, the standard shot. So this is not the depth of field shot you saw earlier. This is the standard shot on the pathway. The funny thing was, Cardiff and Linda wanted to bring their dog to be part of the pictures, but it's a state park and they don't allow dogs. So what we did is, luckily the place I picked was right by the entrance, so they gave us leeway, as long as we didn't go deep into the pathways, that we could keep the dog there and get a shot. When I was shooting my nephew's wedding, you saw the picture with the car. This is after the car was gone. I think this might have been after they were married. They still had their umbrellas, and I said, everybody come together around them with their umbrellas, just to have a little bit of fun and try something different. Compositionally, I'd never done it before. One of the things I'll do with my composition, I'll move. And I've talked about how I move up and I move down, and I'll shoot on the floor. So one of the things I see all the time is photographers, when they're doing a toast, they'll always shoot from the front. Here's dad giving the toast or whatever. And that's great. I'm not saying don't do that. You want to get that. But once you have enough shots of that, I like to actually run around and get the shot of this, which would be them with the crowd watching them, which I think is equally poignant. So I tend to walk I typically walk 6 to 10 miles a day. When I shoot an event, I'm typically moving about that much, just in one room a lot of times, because I'm running around everywhere. So this is a chance for me to get the reaction of the people around them, which I really like. Some venues I can actually go up. This is at the Jewish Community Center in Palo Alto, California. And there's actually a staircase that goes up. And this is from the AV room, where they can control the sound and the projection. So you'll see my same day slideshows running up above, which, by the way, and I've said this at other presentations, if you shoot events for a living and you want to make some good marketing without paying for advertising, project your images from that day at the event that evening or same day, and you will get business. As long as you're shooting well, people see them and say, wow, these are really great images, have your card. I do this at almost every event I shoot, and I don't advertise, and I have 57 events booked. So it does work. Here, I ran up the stairs as fast as I could during what's called the hora, the circle dance, so I could shoot from a higher level above everybody. And of course, I framed it to include the slideshow. This is at the Four Seasons Hotel in Palo Alto in California. And this is a hallway right by registration. But what I noticed was I had great window light coming from their right, from our left, looking at it here, and the hallway kind of goes back. You see the repeating pattern of the wood on the sides, and I thought it was really pretty. So I put them there and shot it, and the lighting was just great. I added just a touch of light from my flash. Again, I turned my flash down. I have the MagMod MagSphere diffuser on there, just to add just a little bit to bring out the shadows and add some catch light to their eyes. But it's kind of a cool location. The only challenge with shooting in this location is anybody who's coming in to register or who's going back out to valet, there's people walking through my background. So because the one kid's smaller, I had to kind of wait for people to get out of my frame sometimes. Or, God forbid, you Photoshop them out, which I've done. This is a wedding I shot a lot. This is another one. This is the woman who took care of our kids when they were growing up, her daughter. So this is in Yosemite. This was our gift to them. And I happened to be in Yosemite prior to doing this wedding. I was teaching for Canon. And so I went and looked at the location. I saw this pond. And this is literally right down the road from where they get married. So after they got married, we went over there and shot. And I love the reflection. I predicted that would happen as long as I had still water. Still one of my favorite shots. And I took this a long, long time ago. Another freebie. This is consistent. This is a friend of mine and her new husband, and they got married at City Hall in San Francisco, and they asked me if I'd shoot it for them. I said, absolutely. Everybody shoots right by the tree because it was during Christmas time. And we did get some shots there, and it was really pretty. And then I said, let's do something different. So we took the elevator upstairs. I saw this view. There were people on the sides, not next to them, but across the way in the distance. I did take them out in Photoshop, but I loved having the lighting there with them looking at each other with everything else in the background. So again, it was trying to do something different for them. That's one of my favorite shots. And I did kind of pose them a little bit, like, hey, why don't you get down? And I originally just said, like, do this, and then they kind of gave each other that look, which I love. This here was before this bride got married. This was actually a paid job. What do we know? This was at the Four Seasons in Half Moon Bay, California. Beautiful place. And this is where the girls were getting ready. And I was shooting with my second shooter, and we were just kind of hanging out. And I think they did tequila shots about this time. And but I looked as I was standing on the side of the table, and I saw a reflection. And I thought, wow, that would be really interesting. So I actually went, and I was like jammed between the table and the window. And I said to the girls, can you all come close to me? And as they did, I saw the reflections. And I said, this is going to work perfectly. So I had a 16-35 on there, which, yes, does distort a little bit on the edges. But I had no room to work. So it was the best I could get. But I like it because it's different. This is and this, believe it or not, is everything I use at events. And a lot of times when I present here, I will put a slide up there and I'll say, here's what I have, but I don't use all of this. I use every bit of this at every event. So the Canon 1DX Mark II, just ordered a new one this morning from here at B&H. Canon 5D Mark IV. I have 4 of the Canon 600 EXRT flashes. Why do I have 4? I have 1 on each camera. I have at least 1 remote, if not 2, and I also have a spare. So actually, sometimes I'll carry 5 or even 6, but generally use 3 to 4. Different lenses, and we'll talk about that in a second because I'll show you how that lens choice matters. When I shoot events like weddings and bar mitzvahs, I use the 100 to 400 quite often. I now have the 200 to 400, which I'm using as well. 200 to 400 is a very expensive lens. I don't expect most event photographers to walk around with a $12,000 lens. It's one I use for the Olympics when I shoot the Olympics, but it's kind of nice to be able to shoot 200 to 400 all the way to f4. But generally, I'll use the 100 to 400. 70-200 is my favorite lens of all times. It is a lens I use almost every day. It's one of my most used lenses at any event. I also use the 24-70 quite often and the 16-35 quite often. The 24-70, the 70-200, and the 16-35 are my 3 go-to lenses for most receptions and parties. And for that, I'll use the 70-200 for isolating close-ups of people, especially when they don't know I'm watching them. A lot of people have very awkward smiles if they're posing, and a lot of times there'll be a great moment and I'll take a picture and then they look at me like, oh, I'm supposed to smile, and then they give you the awkward one. The better shot was more candid. So I like using the 70-200 to kind of like walk around a party and take pictures of people when they don't know I'm shooting pictures of them. I will break out the Canon 8-15 fisheye. I've actually been borrowing Canons for a long time. They just asked for it back, so I ordered one of those this morning as well from here. It's a cool lens for doing something different. I'm going to show you examples of that. I do use the Manfrotto light stands. They have 12-foot light stands that snap together. I have 3 of those in my car. So I use those. I do use the Magma diffusers for my on-camera flash, not the off-camera flash. Those I just shoot bare. Tiffin filters. I have UV filters on the front of every lens. You'll see the silver ones here. It's the HT to protect the front of all my lenses. Gitzo tripods for when I'm shooting the actual event itself, not for the party usually just for the wedding or mitzvah. I use Acrotech ball heads on the Gitzo tripods. I use Think Tank bags to carry everything. I've got my rolling backpack and I've got my large Airport Security 3 rolling bag. I use Black Rapid straps just because they're so comfortable and they're not neck straps. Believe it or not, it makes a huge difference on my back wear and tear, having to cross my shoulder. and the Pro Grade digital cards. I actually am very picky about my memory cards and also picky about the capacity of memory cards. I don't like anything less than 128. Now, the 256 and 512 are the cards that are in the second slot on my cameras, and I only format them about once every month or two. So they're almost like a backup card. I always shoot raw images, full-size raw images, to both cards. So I shoot all my events to 2 cards in case I have a card corruption, which, knock on something, plastic, whatever it is, I have not had that happen, but I do not want to risk that when I have a paying client. Or a non-paying client, as it would be. I don't want to lose images. So I always shoot to 2 cards. I do like the 128s because I don't have to worry about running into the edge of it or filling it, because it generally won't happen. So I actually prefer that size. And as I mentioned, I do use the readers, the Pro Grade digital readers. I've switched. I used to use the CF card as my main card in my 5D Mark IV. I now use the SD card instead as my primary. A, it's faster than the CF, and B, this has slots for both. So I can take the CFast card out of my 1DX Mark II and the SD card out of the 5D Mark IV, put them both in the reader at the same time and concurrently read, which is really cool. I may have mentioned to many of you in the past, when I shoot the Olympics, I have a 14-minute deadline to get images back to the US. And I do the same type of thing when I shoot events. That same day slideshow that you saw that's running, when they sit down for dinner, I'll quickly, in 5 or 10, about 5 minutes, go through everything I just shot the first 2 hours of the party and build a slideshow for the second 2 hours of the party of everything from the first 2 hours. And that's done by using a very fast card, fast reader, fast computer. So, all right. Lens choices. And this is important because you have a very different look from different lenses. So this is my go-to lens. I love the 70-200. Most of the time when I go to shoot portraits, which I'll be doing tomorrow and Friday, or sorry, Thursday and Friday in the Bay Area, a lot of times I'll take like 6 different lenses with me, and inevitably I only use the 70-200. I just love that lens for portraits, but it's great because I can stand back a little bit farther, and it's a thinning lens, which is really nice. Moms really like that. I like that. But it's nice to come back a little bit, zoom in, get perfect bokeh in the background, nice blurry background, which I love. That was shot with it up close, same lens, farther back. Again, same wedding party from last month. It's just a sharp, sharp lens. As I mentioned before, when I'm shooting the actual service, I will use a 100-400 or 200-400. This is 2 weeks ago using the 200-400. This is 400 millimeters or maybe 300 millimeters right at them, but allows me to isolate them from the back of the room without moving, which is really important. And when you're shooting events like this, you can't use a flash. So be able to shoot at f4 is really advantageous. And by the way, when I shoot events, I never leave my camera. I see a lot of event photographers who do the walk away for 10 minutes and, you already shot all this stuff. You never know what's going to happen. And so this is one of those moments where the rabbi pointed to him and he cracked up. I want that shot. So when I shoot events, my goal is to try to capture the unscripted moment, because that's really the most fun. The 24-70 I use for all of my wider shots. I'm not a big fan of fixed focal length lenses or primes. I actually like zoom lenses because in a case like this, I can zoom in or zoom out and give myself a little bit of leeway. I like that ability without moving. I don't want to be so intrusive that I'm running in front of people all the time. So this is the 24-70. The Canon 24-70 version 2 is, I think, as sharp as the 70-200, and that's saying a ton. The version 1 24-70 I did not like. It was soft, it was heavy, I didn't think it was that good a lens. The version 2 is leaps and bounds better, and love it. And then I'll use 16-35 just to get wider shots. People will say, well, wide angle lenses shouldn't be used for events. I totally disagree with that. I like using them. And here she had the hula hoop, and I said, well, hold on a second, and I went almost right underneath the hula hoop and shot this, and it's fun. And again, if they don't like it, they don't have to order it. But I like doing it. Same thing with fisheye lens, and I have all the time. People tell me, don't ever use a fisheye lens at an event. Well, these are kids. They don't care. They want to have fun. So here's a kid. He was up on stage with all of his friends in the background, and I said, turn around for a second. And he went like that. I'm like, perfect. And I fired off a shot. Same thing, this is about 5 weeks ago at a mitzvah at a museum in downtown San Jose, California. And same thing, this is the Canon 8-15 millimeter fisheye at 15 millimeters, and I just fired off right at them. and it's fun. When I post shots like this, people say, oh, good, at least you didn't do the circular thing. Because if you take the 8 to 15 fish and you roll it to 8 millimeters, you get this. And a lot of people say on a full frame, you should never do this. But let me tell you something. This is just shot this last Saturday at the mitzvah I did. And this is up by the San Francisco airport. And I used 8 to 15 at 8 millimeters and shot this. And I think it's really funny. Now, again, some people love it, some people hate it, but you know what? I like it, and I don't care what the rules are. And generally, if I turn this around and show the kids, they're like, whoa. Why? Because you can't get that with an iPhone, right? And what are they used to? Most people in the world today are used to pictures off their phone. So I like showing them something different. So I don't really care what other people think, and I might even post this to social media, and I'll get lambasted by people. I don't care. And just the other day, I did a huge mitzvah. This is about 3 or 4 weeks ago at someone's home, and actually whipped out a drone and did a drone shot because they literally built a stage over the swimming pool. It was a clear plexiglass stage over the pool. And so when they were telling me this about a year and a half ago, I said, that'd be a great drone shot. And the guy goes, that's why we're hiring you. So I did. I actually had a second shooter who was shooting down on the floor so I could have time to break away and get a drone shot. Rare to do, but it was kind of fun. Don't forget the details when you're shooting. So going back to lens choice, a lot of times I will not take a macro lens, and I forgot to include the macro lens on my list. I apologize. I do use the Canon 100mm macro for events, only for weddings typically, and this is at a bar mitzvah, which is rare that I actually have one. This is a tight shot of the yad, the pointer, and the Torah and the talit that they wear. Typically for weddings, we will do the ring shot, so I always bring the 100mm macro for that, to get that shot. By the way, when I shoot events, I always get table shots, bouquet, centerpieces, place cards, all that stuff as well. The last wedding I did for Cardiff recently, I looked and he was wearing this "Don't Panic" button, which I thought was hysterical. So what I do, I actually got in tight, and actually this is probably with the 7200 just standing back and zooming in. But I really like the shot because this speaks volumes. And again, you don't need to see him. You don't have to see everything else. This just says it all. I love it. As I mentioned earlier, I actually got enjoyment from taking this picture. I have passion for what I do, and I love it, and my clients love that I do. And I have this all the time where my clients say to me, you really love what you do, don't you? And I'm like, yeah, I do. And it's like, so they may not like it, although they did. I liked it, so I'll take it. I generally will post about 700 images to their gallery. They're only going to pick maybe 100 and 150. Some will, the best thing I'll ever hear is when some will say to me, there's too many good ones. As a photographer, there's no better problem than that. Because I'll tell them, go ahead and order extras. But I'd rather have that than, I had one client who told me they hired me because the previous kids mitzvah they did, they couldn't find any good ones. That's scary. Lighting, which of course we all know is critical to good photos. So I broke this out into separate little sections. And the first thing we do is going to talk about adding light. And there's been some real game-changing things in the last couple of years. First of all, on-camera flash with and without diffusers. Okay, so this shot I did at her bat mitzvah. This is at her luncheon. It was a very blah-looking luncheon, because luncheons typically are. There wasn't a ton of decor. Pretty girl, and I said to her, wait, go over by the window light, because I just want to get a shot of her with window light. But as she got closer to the window, I saw the reflection. I said, keep going for a second. And then what I did is I was actually using the Magmod diffuser, again, turned down, because I don't want it to look too flashed, but just to lighten up the shadows a little bit on this side, because otherwise it would just be too dark on this side of her face. But I love this shot because of the different expressions that you have with her on both sides, the reflection and her. It's just, I don't know, and just her eyes, everything about it, I just love. Bridget, this is our neighbor when we did her wedding. This is her getting ready at a house in San Francisco. This is at her aunt and uncle's house. And I closed the blinds to get a softer light. And I didn't pose her. She was actually looking down at this when, and I was at the right place to get it. And again, I added just a little bit of light to open up the shadows on the side, but I wanted the direct sunlight coming from her far side of her face. And the fact that she's not looking at me with a smile, I like. It's natural, it's real. This shot of a bat mitzvah kid, this is in Fishman's Wharf area in San Francisco, and I added, this is bare flash, not diffused, -1 for power. So for those of you, if you haven't played with your flash power, play with it. Learn how to go up and down in power, because it's really important. And I generally, most time, will turn my flash down because I want to err on the side of not looking flashed. But it adds catch light into her eyes. It also gets rid of some of the shadows and things that would be there normally. For Bridget's wedding in San Francisco, during the speeches, they had this beautiful sunset. And I looked at the DJ, who I'd worked with many times, and I'm looking at Mark going like cut him. So there was a logical break where one person stopped doing the toast, and there's a break, and I said to Mark, hold them for a second. And the DJ says, hold on everybody, we're gonna resume this in a minute. And I took the bride and groom outside as fast as I could while the sunset was still going and shot this. Now, if I didn't add light to this, and you'll see a picture later where I didn't, obviously they'd be a silhouette. So this is a full-blown undiffused flash going at them. I probably went full power for this shot. And then because I'm flashing them, the railing then gets lit as well. So I'm trying to move the flash, bend the flash off a little bit so it doesn't hit the railing. Inevitably, it still does, and I go in Photoshop and I'll darken that down afterwards. Here, this is, again, almost always in the morning when I do portraits. It's a straight, bare flash on camera to keep it simple. I don't have assistants that shoot with me most of the time, except for weddings. For all bar mitzvahs, I shoot by myself. And so on-camera flash, turned down so it looks very natural, and I think it looks great. There are people that say to me all the time, like, this guy's full of, you know what, because he says you can shoot with on-camera flash. And people disagree with that, and I don't. I think that, and my clients are very happy with the images. So I keep it simple, and it works. Another one, looking out the window, again, adding a little bit of diffused flash with a Magmod MagSphere, just to light up a little bit of the side, just like you saw with the other girl with the reflection. This one here, you'll notice I've got light off to the side. And actually, this is a bare flash that I actually turned and pointed at the wall. There's a white wall about 30 feet away on my left, her right. So I'm pointing the flash there and bouncing it back at her. This one here was shot many years ago, but this is a diffused flash, but capturing the moment. Really important to get that. I love that moment. It doesn't quite look flashed. It does separate them from the background, but the lighting is really nice. This one here, this is at City Hall again in San Francisco. This is one of my good friend's daughters. Another gift to them. And beautiful girl. I've known her since she was little. And we were at City Hall shooting this thing, and there's window light coming. And I saw that, so I positioned them with the rotunda in the background, but mainly used window light. And again, I used a diffuse flash turned down, I think -2 for this one, just to add just a touch of light. But then I took her and I moved her in front of the window and I let it go out. I didn't add any flash to this on the side. So this is what happens if you're using strictly window light and letting it go dark. Still works. If you have someone who's slightly overweight, it's a great way to slim someone. That's not her case, but it's a great way to slim someone because it really kind of takes only half of your face. This one here, I actually pointed the flash, this is at the same temple, but I pointed the flash at the right wall. And now you can see that the light is coming from this side. So this is all on-camera flash, every one of those. Now, one of the things that changed when Canon came out with the Canon 600 EXRT flash is they went to a radio transmit from one flash to the other, which I love. It allows me to have multiple flashes synchronized. I don't have to use pocket wizards. I don't have to use like line of sight. It's incredibly accurate. It's TTL, which means I don't have to mess with it very much. And it's simple. And to me, that was a huge game changer in the way I shoot events. So this is a shot, one of the first shots I ever did with the 600 flash. I had it off to the side, and it was obviously firing toward the girl's face. So I lit the back of his head and the front of her face. And this is the first time I ever got the Canon 2470 and a remote flash. It was the first event I did. I'll never forget it. Because I got home and I thought, wow, this is cool. This shot without the remote flash would have been me just lighting them from the front. It wouldn't have been as dynamic. So for instance, this shot, which is of what they call the Hora, kid up in the chair, this is taken before the 600 flashes were out. This is taken about 7 years ago. And you'll see that it's a flat light. It's not bad, but it's a flat light. And you can tell it's coming from me, from the camera, because the people in the front are also more lit than she is. If you look at the shot I did in that backyard 3 or 4 weeks ago, totally different. Now I've got a remote flash off to my left as I'm shooting, so I'm lighting him and everybody from the side. It's a more dynamic shot. And the cool thing is I can power it up and power it down from the flash on my camera. So I'm using the flash on camera as diffused with the Magmod, and I've got the other one bare on a 12-foot stand, usually in one corner. Rarely will I set up multiples. Usually it's only one remote. Same thing here for the wedding in Half Moon Bay at the Ritz-Carlton. My remote flash is now on my right. You could tell because it's hitting the side of his head and lighting her hair. Again, without that remote light, this would have been a one-dimensional shot. It would have been me just firing a flash at them. So I love having that extra light spilling onto them. This is one I just did 2 weeks ago in their backyard, which is funny because I don't usually shoot in people's backyards. I did 2 in a row. Here I had the remote flash on the side. It was really dark. They were supposed to do this dance when it was still light. They ran late. Catering ran late, so we ended up with pitch black. So thank goodness for the remote flash. So I'm lighting them with the flash on camera, which is adding some light, as you can tell. But the main light is coming from that bare flash coming straight onto him. And look at his face. That's being lit. He's looking right at that remote. This one here, I had a remote on a light stand. This is during a rehearsal of the mitzvah. Some temples, we're not allowed to actually shoot the service, so we have to just shoot the rehearsal. So I had a 600 flash off to the side, shooting through a white umbrella. And so, again, that dimension is why I've got more light on this side, on the far side of her face, and it's going into shadows that's coming toward us. That dimension, to me, is so much fun to shoot with. I love having the remote lights. This is at another bat mitzvah. It was a Harry Potter theme. So this guy, he's actually an Apple computer employee, believe it or not. He's one of the chief scientists or something like that, and he does this on the side. But that remote flash does 2 things for me here. One is it does give me directional light, as we've already talked about. But the other thing it really does is it allows me to freeze my subjects in really nice focus. One of the things you'll find if you're shooting manually, which I typically do for a party, generally I'll shoot around f4, 160th or 200th of a second, generally around ISO 1600. But sometimes with that amount of flash, if I'm not using a remote flash, I'll still get movement. Having that extra light coming from the remote allows me to freeze the moment better than I ever did in the past, which is important for events like this when they're up in the chair. And you can see, again, how the light's coming from the side and how it's isolating them from everybody else in the background. This is probably, I love the shot because this is probably the only time I've ever shot the Hora where a kid actually tried to stand up on the chair during the dance. He's a little bit crazy. I know the family well, and the kids are really vivacious, I guess is the best way to put it. That was a fun moment, though. But again, you can see the remote light coming onto his face that would have been absent if I didn't have the remote flash. Same thing, this is at Bridget's wedding, again in San Francisco. Having that remote from the side helps to light her up. Couldn't have done that without. Now, there are times when you want to add light. There are also times when you want to subtract light. So this is the case where I was shooting this event, another bar mitzvah, and I saw this woman doing the caricature on her iPad, and she also had this large screen. And I noticed the screen was lighting her, And she was trying to, this is toward the end of the party, and she was trying to draw this kid, and she couldn't see him well enough to draw him. So he had his iPhone with the light turned on, lighting his face. And I thought, that's really cool. So what did I do? I turned my flash off. I also turned the camera down about one full stop. So in other words, I darken the image. I'm subtracting light so that I'm not blowing out the background or her face. So I'm darkening the whole scene except for the two of them. Same thing when you have neon or glow in the dark, those kinds of things. If you were to keep the camera at a standard metering and you would keep your flash at full power, these colors don't show up. A lot of times they get those light up white styrofoam type things, and if you shoot that with a flash, they're all white. So I will purposely turn the flash down, also turn the camera down in about half of a stop to accentuate the colors in the glow sticks, as opposed to turning them just clear plastic. And there's times you don't need flash. So this was at the golden hour at Philip's wedding. Again, they drove them up in the Mustang. That's all golden light from the sun. I didn't need to add any light to it. Didn't need to. It was so nice just the way it was. So literally, this is probably 5 minutes before sunset. Didn't need it. This one here is still one of my favorite images. I've showed this before. And this one I did her mitzvah. This is after her luncheon. The grandmother said to me, "Can you get a shot of her reading from a book? Because I have the same shot of her mother reading from the book." I said, "Sure." So I took her and I had her kind of read from the book, and then I noticed that there was this stream of light coming from a window. So I moved her into that light, which actually worked perfectly because it was hitting the floor and bouncing from the floor, which is why the bottom of her hands are lit. And then it was also hitting the white pages of the book, which was lighting her face. So I actually didn't really need to add any flash to this shot. I'm actually using the sunlight coming through the window and bouncing off of everything to get the shot. A little bit of luck involved in that it worked out that way, but it's something I keep in my mind all the time as I'm shooting. Like, what can I do with the light that's here? Here's another one with the glow sticks. Everything turned down in power. And you can tell I've done that because if you look at the ceiling and everything in the front, it's all really dark. But I don't care, because the ceiling isn't my subject. I don't care about the DJ. I care about the kid in the middle. Here's the airbrusher. A lot of times when you do these mitzvahs, they'll have people airbrush t-shirts and hats and things. So I work with this guy all the time. And so I turned off my flash. I used only his light that he had above his airbrush thing and lit him just with that. Again, if I shoot this at regular metering for my camera, it will blow out his face because it's trying to get everything else exposed correctly. So I'll take the camera, I'll go down one stop or even two stops in the camera itself, no flash, just to expose his face correctly. And again, this is the kind of thing where I always give images to the vendors because they appreciate it. It's also good for my business because I'll watermark it with my logo and they'll put it up on their social media. I do love window light, as I've already mentioned to you. This was actually turned down because I wanted to expose just for her face. I didn't need to add any flash to this. I just turned the camera down to make sure that I was exposed correctly right in her face line, and I was okay with letting it go dark behind her because there was nothing behind her that I needed to show. In this case, for the candle lighting, they asked her, before you blow out the candles, just close your eyes and make a wish. So I quickly turned off my flash and I used the light of the candles to light her face. So all that light you're seeing, that kind of orange light, is coming from the candles, not from a flash. This was years ago. I was in a temple shooting a mitzvah. This guy was off to the far side. I don't even know if they knew who he was. But I'm shooting up on a podium in the back of the temple, and I looked over and I saw the sunlight hitting this guy. Now, again, if I expose this normally in the camera, it would have been a boring picture because it just would have lit everything. But if I turned it way down and exposed only for the highlights, I got that shot. And I love this picture. I wish I knew who it was so I could send it to him. But it was just really cool, very directional light that was on him. As I mentioned to you earlier, with the couple in San Francisco, with Bridget and her husband, if I didn't use a flash, you would get a silhouette. Well, sometimes I want a silhouette. Sometimes I don't want to add light. And again, here, I wanted to turn the camera down because I wanted to expose, I wanted them to go darker and expose for the sunset. So this is down about a half of a stop and exposing for them. Shoot a lot, and I tell people this, like I told you, I shoot 2,500 to 3,500 images, typically an event. I find that, memory cards are cheap, why not? I shoot a lot because I want good expressions. For those of you who shoot events, you know that the difference between half a second can be a make or a break for a photo. So there are times when I'll shoot and I one shot, rarely, but I do. And I get home like, I should have taken two because someone's eyes are closed or half closed. Or I can't tell you how many times I've shot where you have smile, smile, and then the guy off the side's looking over here. But he did turn one time over here. So I always shoot in bursts of 3. Yeah, it's more to go through the next day to delete and get rid of, but I'd rather do that and have the key shot. The difference of a half a second can make or break a photo. Also, it is better odds for sharp focus. When the kid goes up in the chair for the hora, or it's the first dance at a wedding, I am focusing, back button focusing on them, and I fire 3 shots, I back button focus again, fire 3 more, do it again, fire 3 more, just in case I'm off. So I'll shoot a lot because I want to get as sharp a focus as I can. What I don't want to do is go back button focus, yeah, I got them locked in, and shoot 30 shots and get home and go, I was off by an inch. And I'm really picky about my photos. So I will shoot extra to make sure I get what I want. As I mentioned, memory cards have gotten so cheap. When I started at Lexar, 14 years ago, a 1 gig card was $200 and something. 1 gig. Now, for that money, you could buy a 512 gig or 256. I mean, the prices have just plummeted. So I tell people, look, if you're doing this for a business, you have to invest in that business, and this is a good way to do it. And like I said, if you have a camera that has 2 slots, shoot to both cards together. Be ready for anything. So when I talk about shooting a lot, it's moments like this where you just don't know what's going to happen. This is the DJ, and all of a sudden he just jumped in midair, and I happened to be there with a 16 to 35 ready to get the shot and got it. One of my favorite wedding images ever. They told this little girl, whatever you do when you sit down, make sure you cross your legs and look really pretty. But then tell her how to walk into the wedding, which I loved, and she put the dress in her mouth. Funny. And I'm laughing as I'm shooting this. This is with a 70-200. But I love the background. Even though it's diffused, you can see the reactions. It's a priceless shot that this girl will probably live with forever. But it's one of those things where it shows how important it is to be on. So I play ice hockey, and they tell ice hockey players, keep your head on a swivel, which means always be looking around. So if I see the puck go into the corner, as I'm skating into the puck, I'm also looking to see where's my winger so I can turn around and pass the puck back to him. So you have to keep your head open. Where are the defensemen? Same thing's true in shooting an event. You have to be aware of what's happening in all directions for this moment to happen. And so when I'm shooting an event, yeah, I might be shooting the kid right here or, the couple's first dance. And I look over, oh, shoot, grandma's dancing. She's never been on the dance floor. I better get over there and get that. So I'm always looking around. Helps to be type A. I was shooting a mitzvah rehearsal, and all of a sudden I look over and the 2 brothers were there, and the little kid made that look over to his brother and just cracked me up and fired off a shot. And I purposely, I was framing it to include all the blue chairs, and then he made that little reaction. Split second, the image before it, he was looking straight ahead. The image after it, he was looking straight ahead. So 1 split second. This is at that one I just did 3 or 4 weeks ago at the outside party. And they only one time in the evening, or it might have been twice, they blew off this confetti cannon. So I didn't know when they were going to do it. And I knew it was coming. I just didn't know when. So I had to quickly make sure I was ready to fire off and get that shot. Another favorite of mine, this is at a mitzvah. This little girl was hysterical. Well, she's out dancing. All the kids were like cheering her on because she's so little, and she's in the middle of the dance floor. You don't get this a lot. This kid had like chutzpah. It was great. And then she looked at the DJ and see how she's kind of giving him attitude. And I shot this with the 16-35. My remote flash is coming. You can see their shadows. That's coming from the remote. But I lit her, and all I could think about when I took that shot is when I get home, that better be sharp. I love that photo. I just love the attitude that this little girl had. It's so funny. And then sometimes things happen, like a lot of times family will tell me, hey, this is gonna happen later on in the wedding, or this is gonna happen later on in the mitzvah. Here, this is just an impromptu thing where they just lifted him up and started taking him through the room. One of my favorite shots of something similar happened here. This is a place called Sparky's Hot Rod Garage, and it's this funky place that's no longer in business in San Carlos, California. But they lifted the kid. I happen to be up on this block. I like to get up high when I'm shooting there. And they lifted him, and this is a 16-35, and I shot down on him, got the shot. Again, the remote flash on my left. But you have to be ready for those moments, because there's nothing more frustrating as a photographer than this happened and you're in the back of the room taking pictures of someone eating hors d'oeuvres or whatever. So you got to be ready at all times, which is why when you shoot events, you get so tired. Because physically, you're running all over the place, you're contorting, you're holding heavy camera gear, and mentally, you gotta be on your game for 12 hours. I like to get creative, again, for my own self-enhancement as well as for the family. So I like to do things like spinning the camera. So typically this happens when I'm shot out. I've been at their party for 3 hours, and I'll say to the DJ, hey, what's the next hour and a half? And they go, no, everything's done. We're just gonna dance it out for an hour and a half. I'm like, oh, great. So I'm like, all right, I've already got 600 pictures of kids dancing, so what am I gonna do? So I'll change lenses to the fisheye, do stuff different, or in this case, I'll take the camera and I'll spin it. People are confused by this shot. This is about a 1/4 second shot. So what I'll do is I won't even change. I'll just roll the ISO way down, put it in aperture priority so my shutter speed's like 1/4 second, and I'll take the camera. This is with the mag mod on the camera, and as I'm firing it, I'm twisting the camera. The flash, when it fires, freezes whoever's in front of me because there's enough light that it freezes them. But the ambient light in the background is the shutter's still open, so I'll get the spin from that behind them. Takes a little practice. You're spinning as you're shooting. So it's a little half spin, or you can go full spin, but if you do that, chances are that with too long of a shutter, you'll blur your subject. But a little bit of a half spin, and inevitably, they love it. I'll show it to the family, like, whoa, how did you do that? So it shows that you as a photographer are having fun, pushing your limits a little bit, trying something different. And it's something they haven't seen before. Same thing with this kid. He had one of those little glow stick things. And I said, he was being really cute. And I said, hold on a second. And I go, now do that again. And he did this. And I slowed the shutter down and I got the motion. And of course, I showed it to him and he's like, whoa, because the human eye doesn't see that. No. Same thing here. This is at Sparky's Hot Rod Garage again. This is spinning the camera. And they're nice and sharp, again, because the flash is going and freezing them. When they're running around, if they're playing games, a lot of times they play these games like Coke, Pepsi. Well, they'll put all the kids on one side. And if they say Coke, they all have to run this way. And if they say Pepsi, they all have to run this way. And if they say 7-Up, they both run in the middle and high five. So they do these games. So a lot of times I'll shoot that and freeze the action. Once I've got 5 or 6 of those, I'll try something different. So here I'm slowing the shutter down. I'm actually panning with her. And in the next presentation, when I show some of the wildlife photos, you're going to see some of the stuff where I've panned, and I show this in my Olympic photography, where I'll move the lens with them. I like the fact that everything's blurry except for her. This shot, again, from Cardiff's wedding. It was the very last shot I did at the end of the night, and I just spun the camera a little bit because I was tired and thought that'd be a good parting shot. Typically when I shoot events, I like to get at least one good ending shot. So bar mitzvah, they've done, I've been with them since 9 in the morning. It's now 11 o'clock at night. And I usually say to the kid, like, give me a thumbs up or give me something. Or sometimes I'll get a picture of them walking away and that'll be the last picture of the book. So I'm always thinking about the story. Because photographers, when we're shooting events, we need to be telling a story from start to finish. When I shoot for clients, I don't charge by the hour, I charge by the day. And if the party goes late, I go late with them. And I don't go up to them and say, oh, you're going to be an extra half hour, it's going to be more money. No, I just do my job. I shoot for the extra half hour. Now, I've got one coming up that goes till 2 in the morning, different story. I'll charge them extra, and that's already predetermined. But my job is to tell the story from start to finish. One thing I really hate is when I hear a videographer or photographer say, oh, yeah, it's 10, I'm done. I go, what, they haven't cut the cake yet? Or, well, yeah, but they only pay me till 10. That means they're just doing it because they're doing it for a paycheck and they don't really care. That's not what I want to project as my brand to my clients. Should I shoot events? I do it because I want to get a cool parting shot for them and for me. We're going to talk about this in the next presentation about photographing wildlife. So I just talked about how I shoot events. I'm one of those weird photographers where I shoot, I've done the last 6 Olympics. I do events like mitzvahs and weddings. I do wildlife, landscape. I just love photography, so I'll shoot anything. So the next presentation, we're going to talk about that. And just to let people know, because everybody asks about what we've got coming up. So in 3.5 weeks, we'll be in Namibia. And then after that, we're in Botswana. And come back from that trip, and then we're in the rainforest of Costa Rica, which is really cool. Then Croatia, Slovenia in September, and then Tanzania for the reverse migration in January and February. Both, we're doing 2. And then back to Costa Rica for the rainforest in July, then back to Tanzania for migration, and then India for January, February. So a lot going on. One of the cool things I should mention, Canon, who sponsors me, anybody who goes on any of our workshops, Canon will give free gear, free loaners of anything you want to take with you. So even like a $200 to $400, $12,000 lens, you can borrow for the whole trip if you want to. So if you ever go on one of the workshops and you've ever said, yeah, what I would like to shoot with a 1DX, you can borrow one for the trip. Try it, which is really cool. This is how you get a hold of me. Website is just jeffcable.com. I do have a webpage on there called Jeff's Deals. All my sponsors have deals for things, including ProGrade Digital. So check that out. The blog, how many people here read the blog? Great. I tend to blog every week about what I shot, how I shot it. Actually, the blog that's still up there now was a 4-part series, I think it was, of how I shot that wedding. Because the wedding that you saw in the trees, in the redwood trees, that one and the last shot that you saw with the spin, I did on my own. They didn't want to pay for a second photographer, so I shot it all on my own, and I talk about the challenges of shooting a wedding if you're the only photographer. My email address is just jeff@jeffcable.com. I do answer every email, and those who have emailed me know that I answer every email. So I will. Facebook and Instagram is just Jeff Cable Photography, is all one word, and Twitter is jcable12. So I'll stick around and answer any questions you guys have. For those online, thanks for joining in, and hopefully we'll see you in another hour and a half.